Hi, Chris McClune here with Fire Apparatus and Emergency Equipment. Welcome back to TIC Talk. As always, my guest is Brad Harvey from Bullard, and today we are going to talk about size up. We've hit on a lot of niche areas on the first few episodes, but now we're going to get back to where thermal imagers are used a lot of the time. I think you could argue most of the time, they're going to be used at structure fires, maybe inside. But battalion chiefs or first arriving captains who are riding the seat of a pumper or a ladder truck are going to get out. They're going to have that TIC with them, and they're going to be using it to aid with their size up. So, Brad, thank you again for joining me today. You've been in thermal imaging for a long time. During that time,
you make me feel old when you say it that way. But
well, I believe me. I mean, I've been in the fire service for a long time, so I feel the same way. Yeah. But thermal imaging technology has changed over time, whether it just be the screen, whether it be NFPA compliance features that you must have if you're going to be NFPA compliant. So to get us started, before we get into talking about exactly how they're being used inside, so talk about what has changed over time as thermal imager technology has evolved and how those changes have changed how we might use thermal imagers during size up.
Sure. So as you said, the change can be dramatic when you stop to think about it. It wasn't 15 years ago that thermal imagers were $30,000. You carried them on a shoulder strap. I mean, even our earliest models, they're giant beasts, but they can see through smoke. Right, and that it makes that worth it. But we've gone from this really expensive, huge capital investment item that one person carried, and a lot of times, felt the need to protect the unit. To, there's a wide variety of very handheld, very portable, durable devices. Their imagers have gotten smaller. They've gotten cheaper, significantly cheaper over time. They've become more widely adopted. So you're seeing, obviously, thermal imaging in a lot other places. 10 years ago, handheld was the only place that it ever showed up. And now we've got drones that frequently are equipped with thermal imaging. There's quite a few departments that have imagers on the tips of the aerials or beneath the bucket. So they're showing up in a lot more places. They're significantly cheaper and they're more portable. So lots of things have changed in that regard.
You could almost say that the fact that they have become smaller, the fact that they have become less expensive means that more firefighters, when they get to the scene, can carry them. And that has everything to do with size up. We used to say, I say we, I mean, my fire department was always real big on, I'm sure others are as well, that size up begins at the point of dispatch. For me, it was when my pager would activate and I would listen to where the call was. If county said it's a dwelling, then I know it's a house. If they said it was a structure, then it was probably going to be a commercial building. But if you know your district, you know your area, even if it comes in as a commercial, it might be a converted house. So you're still looking at, you're still always thinking and sizing things up. For me, as I'm driving to the firehouse, for a career firefighter, it says they're getting all their gear on to get onto the truck to call in service. And, before, maybe only one of us, there might be four of us on the back of the truck that have been doing size up in our minds as we went down, but only one of us could grab the thermal imager. So now one of those big changes in size up is just the accessibility of those thermal imagers to more firefighters.
So you bring up a good point, and this might be just outside of thermal imaging a bit, but there are several really unique things about the fire service that no other industry really mimics. And they've been identified in research, but one is a commitment to act. Like, on the way there, you're going to do something about it. Whether you know what to do or not, you've kind of pre-committed to act. The second is under time duress. So you don't have a lot of time to think about it. Third is great personal risk or risks to the civilians. And then fourth, which I think is key, regardless of the amount of information that's available. firefighters are going to act on the unknown, and it makes it really, really unique. And I think it drives a desire to constantly fill with information. So as you're driving to the fire station, you're thinking about what information can I preload now? And if you're headed from the station to the scene and police give an update, that's updating your mental picture. When you arrive on the scene, now I can get a visual on the place, right? And so you're just making the best picture you can with what information you have at the moment, realizing that when you arrive, you're going to do something. And thermal is the next logical extension of that. Our eyes tell us so much, but then there's this available other sense that can give you a different perspective on the house that none of your other senses can provide. And so it's just another extension of getting valuable information so that you can update your idea as to what's going on.
Are there, besides more people having them, besides the size shrinking, are there specific features of thermal imagers today that make size up more effective? And we've said it almost, I think, every time that we've had one of these. Thermal imagers are helping us do our jobs more efficiently as well. So are there specific TIC features today that are making size up more efficient and more effective?
Yeah. So, I think anytime you're talking about really any application, but some special sensitivity to size up, is going to be, image quality or picture quality. So resolutions have increased in thermal imagers over time, which serves as the basis, for image quality. But image processing has also, really advanced over time. So we like to think about the imager in 2-second windows. Most firefighters, like on an interior search, you come to a bedroom, they're going to pick it up, do a quick look around the room just to get the layout, see what's what, put it down, and then go to work, as they should. But that's our opportunity to convey information. It's that 2 seconds they spend glancing around the room. And so how do you convey the most information in that available 2 seconds? And, in my opinion, at least, the basis of that is image quality. We navigate the world with our eyes, and so great image quality leads to rapid recognition of, even small features. But what's different about size up is different than interior type work. In interior work, you're typically dealing with large heat loads, dramatic differences. These things stand out really well. In a size up mode, you really, if you want the best information, you got to pay attention to some of the nuances of what's there. You're looking at heat patterns, not just, the bright white window, but, heat patterns over the building. You're looking for heat buildup in the attic. There's a lot of information that's there if the imager can show that from a quality perspective. But then on top of that, so after image quality, most manufacturers offer some type of an investigative mode, which is really meant to show subtle differences in those types of scenarios. So lots of the investigation modes, they're really not meant for interior firefighting, those big temperature loads, but they can create differentiation when you're looking at the more subtle differences. Everybody's is a little bit different, but everybody offers one. And so it's a feature you should definitely, pay attention to, because again, what you're looking for, I don't want you to have to look through the imager for 10 seconds to understand what's going on. I want it to be a 2-second, window. And so some of those features can help.
Now, you and I have spoken about training with thermal imagers before, and a lot of times, what we've discussed is just get familiar with it. Just, take it outside, look around. When you're on shift, just look at different things, turn the burner on in the kitchen, look to see what it looks like, figure out how to interpret those images. But when we're talking about training for size up, it seems to me, I feel like, we want to be a little bit more structured with more structured than we'll just go out and take a look, because that was really awareness, familiarity with the unit itself. But this is really getting into a very specific use for the unit. So what should, if a fire department is trying to set up its thermal imaging training,
Yep.
Specifically for size up, what should be in there to help them become more efficient and effective at sizing up using a thermal imager?
So, gosh, there's so much that we could talk about here, but I'll try to limit it. Looking at normal houses during the day. So one of the things that you can train people on is what's called solar loading. The sun makes things warm, right? And so looking at a residential roof that's in bright sunlight and getting an idea of what a normal roof looks like. I mean, sounds like a broken record because we've mentioned this before, but for you to spot the abnormal, you have to have a really good understanding of what the normal looks like. And so looking at, a residential roof in broad sunlight, if you get one in the morning where it's facing like due east, then you should see where the back side of the roof is cooler and the front side of the roof, just to drive home the fact that the sun has an impact on these things. You can see certain features of buildings. So parapet walls, a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times are identifiable because they're just thermally different than the rest of the building. And so those you may be able to spot. So there's a certain amount of just practice with normal buildings out there. But as far as constructing size up, scenarios you might want to create are more subtle than you would otherwise create. So one of the props that I use around here is just a Harbor Freight heat gun. And you can set it so that I like them because they'll set up on their back. You don't have to hold it. And so you can turn that on and put it 6 inches from a wall. And it'll create this really faint, gradually developing V pattern on the wall. But if you put it too close, it's going to be really obvious. But put it back a little ways, let it run, and then have people come in and see if they notice like the thing that seems abnormal in there. And so you can start to create situations that encourage the more subtle analysis, as opposed to if we focus only on structure fires for these things, that's kind of the easy part, right? It's singular goal. It's just trying to find the thing, and those types of temperature differences are really easy to assess. So encourage setting up situations where where you're encouraging them to take the opportunity, like on a size up, to really consider what's being seen. Because the more information you have, then the better your understanding of the situation and the better decisions that can be made over it. If you don't mind, I can show you a couple of videos.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, let me. So here's one that could be used for a hazmat size up, just as an example. Obviously, you're just looking at hose that are on the ground, but you see a leak here in the coupling, and I'm going to pause it for a second. I think I am. And what you see there are obviously two different pools of water, but they're coming from the same leak. So you've got a leak at that coupling that's under the hose, and then you've got a leak that's there above the hose. And so the fact that the one above the hose is arcing through the air is just creating a different temperature than the one that's leaking directly onto the ground. So obviously this is all water, all from the same source, but thermally different when looked through the imager. So, should you have a UPS truck, that's leaking some type of chemical, this is just an extra investigative tool in the box. If these chemicals were exo or endothermically reacting, that would be obvious on here. We'd see those temperature differences where the things are touching. the lack of that indicator doesn't mean these are inert, anything along those, but it's more information than you would have just sizing up a normal kind of a fluid leak scenario. If we take it in these can be hard to replicate in like a station level training, but if you have a burn building, so obviously we have a warm window, but you can see, if you look above the window, you can see a heat pattern up the side of the wall, and you can see convected heat up here around the hand railings when I hit play. And so just to explain, the red square that you see is what we call a hot area detector. It's going to constantly find the hottest pixel and show it to you, just to kind of keep you grounded in the scenario. So in this video, it's pretty short, so before we play it through, you clearly can tell that there's something happening in that entire room, right? I have it on both the A and the B side of the building. I've got heat venting from both windows that are touching, both handrails. And so even if this wasn't smoke present, the heat still vents. And those types of things become really visible here. The other thing that jumps out is that the hose line is warm, right? And that happens when they don't flow, right? So you can, even from the outside, you can get some impression as to what's happening with the hose lines in terms of warm ones aren't flowing, and if warm ones suddenly start to cool off, they are flowing. The point is there's a lot that can be done, but I think what you want to encourage, left to their own devices, if you see an image that has two bright windows, you kind of gut instinct know that the problem is there, and there can be a tendency to put the imager down and just go solve it, as opposed to taking just one extra second and looking at the other details, noticing that there's heat venting from that window. It gives you an impression of what you're going to run into.
And it seems like just to add to it, not as far as using the thermal imager for during training, but it seems like to be thinking ahead to what you want to train on, so that when you are at the burn building for something else, you're collecting those videos like you just showed us, and being able to put all that together for those future lesson plans. Yeah,
there's a lot to be said for recording the boring. Right, like if we went to this burn building to do live fire training, that's what people are there to do. That takes a lot of intention of the instructors. So there's a lot of focus on that task, and so we think about, well, the action starts when we're at risk, but there's lots to be said for recording every element of that, and from the outside all the way through to the inside, and then going back and look at what's valuable later. You may find stuff that was missed at the training. If you're an instructor, you may find really unique ways to train, fire behavior, just over something that was captured. A lot of the imagers, so if you have a DVR on your imager, most of the manufacturers have an auto record where if the imager's on, the DVR is running. And so if you have imagers that are assigned like to a training division, maybe those you could enable with auto record, and then you just are capturing everything that occurred when that imager's on. It's not one more button to push.
Now, along with that, you were just talking about seeing that there was heat venting, being able to recognize that even short of smoke, absent smoke, you could tell that something is going on there. Firefighters might miss that. But what are some of the mistakes that firefighters make when using a TI during size up? And more importantly, how do they correct them?
Yeah. So, obviously the mistakes are the first mistakes are just size up related, like not doing a size up or not doing a full 360 on a size. You could progress then to just not using the thermal imager as a part of the size up. If you only have one and you're sending it in, with the team while you do a size up, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, just, something to consider. I think there's a lot of valuable information on the size up, but getting past that, some common mistakes. So one would be thinking that it only matters on structure size ups, or structure fires, that's where I should use the imager. You can use the imager to size up absolutely any incident that you go to. If it's a possibly overheated electrical vehicle, it's a car accident, it's an investigation even, still conducting a size up with an imager can provide information that wasn't otherwise available. Past that, so obviously, structure fires are kind of a high stress, high risk environment, but don't think that size up stops at the threshold, right? Like you said, size up starts the minute you have some piece of information about it. And, but commonly I think it can be thought, well, that it stops once I'm committed interior. I think it continues. I think you're sizing up the room that you're in, and you're looking for ideas of what's going to occur in the next room. And so it's there's that 2-second window of just getting the layout of the room and an understanding. But, if you've got an extra second, considering some of the subtle heat differences, that size up is just continuous. Every new room that you enter can be a new level of size up. Which way to the fire, a lot of times is indicated by vented heat. And those things can be trained for and detected in the normal operations.
Now, I've got it. I'm looking around. I'm seeing things. There's so much that happens on the radio. You want to keep, radio messages short or as short as possible, so you're not tying something up or stepping on someone else trying to get an important message out. How should those who are conducting the size up communicate what they're seeing back to the IC? And I don't mean what method, like do you use a radio or do you just yell across the street? I mean, how should they articulate, what they are seeing on that screen back to IC, the IC or incoming units, so that, that size up for the incoming unit can continue. Because, if I'm there and I'm communicating one thing, the guy sitting in the front seat is going to start thinking, okay, which line am I going to use? How am I going to position the rig? All that kind of stuff. So how to maximize the information to the receiver, how should they communicate what they're seeing?
It's a great question. I'm not sure that there's a succinct, direct answer that's going to work for everyone. The thing, so some depends on your department. If your department trains on or uses thermal imaging commonly enough that the terminology you might use is known to everybody. Because the terminology, if you try to speak in technical terms, it can mean different things to different people. But if your department commonly uses thermal imaging as a part of the initial arrival report or what have you, great, follow that. My probably the most blanket or best advice is just report when something doesn't look right. Like, I don't know that it requires a big technical assessment. It just could be like if you arrive at a house, middle of the day, but the roof has a distinct heat pattern on it. So usually the sun will evenly heat the roof. But if you're looking at the roof and there's a distinct heat pattern and it is hotter at the peak of the roof, so you have some reason to believe that there's been a fire exposure beneath the roof for some period of time, or you question the stability of the roof based on sometimes just saying, hey, so the chiefs have now ordered people to the roof to vent. It may be that, hey, take a look at that with your imager. What I see doesn't look right. Just a word of caution can be enough that is both succinct and causes the people that might encounter that to react to it. interestingly, over the years, one of the fairly common features that we've gotten away from is I call it telemetry, the transmission of the video. So that can be a pretty easy way to do it. It's really not a common feature today, mostly because I think in the past those transmitters were unreliable. But today we have LTE and FirstNet, and there's much more potential for transmission of the video, which could help with that. But I think for the most part, if you see something that stands out to you as odd, abnormal, particularly around the roof, things that might indicate balloon construction, or if you see a hot basement, that could be an indicator of where the fire is located. Those types of things, I think, can be reported just like anything else. But if nothing else, it would just be something's not right, and give other people a moment to consider or get their imager out and take a look at the roof before they step off the bucket.
Well, Brad, I want to thank you again for joining me today. Before I let you go, though, do you have any final thoughts on thermal imager use and size up?
Yeah. So the whole purpose of the size up is to gather information, right? It's to understand, to see what you can see and understand what you can understand, because it informs the entirety of the incident. Use thermal to supplement that. The old saying, I don't even know who quoted it first, right? But so goes the first line, goes the rest of the fire, right? Because those first few minutes when you don't have a lot of information is where plans are getting executed. And thermal is an opportunity to add a whole lot of information you otherwise wouldn't have had access to. And so I'd encourage people just to not bypass that opportunity.
Okay, well, Brad, again, thanks for sitting down with us today to talk about size up with a thermal imager. Again, this has been TIC Talk. If you are interested in seeing any of our previous episodes, they are all archived at fireapparatus.com/podcast. So again, Brad, my thanks to you for sitting down with me today. Absolutely. This has been Chris McClune for Fire Apparatus and Emergency Equipment and TIC Talk. Have a good one and stay safe. Thanks again.